Hello, folks. Good morning, good afternoon, maybe even good evening to all of you out there across the world. Thank you very much for joining us for a Spider Strategies training session on charts and reports in Scoreboard. I will be your host and presenter today. My name is Tom Keating, and I am a training and customer experience consultant here at Spider Strategies. A quick look at me. And also, while I have this slide up, I would also invite you to take note of my email address should you want to contact me anytime after this session with any follow-up questions or interest in anything we're going to be covering today or anything regarding Spider Strategies training and customer experience in general. Today's agenda, in just a nutshell, is we're going to go over a quick overview of charts and reports, the use of them and the consumption of them within Scoreboard. Then we'll get into showing you how to build reports, how to build charts, and to take advantage of the reporting capability to do some math scorecard editing, sort of behind the scenes via, again, reports in Scoreboard. Before we dive into Scoreboard and take a look at the charts and reports, just wanted to cover some brief webinar logistics with you. First of all, this webinar is being recorded for future use by yourself or any of your colleagues and for reference in the future. All you attendees are muted, and the reason we're doing that is our experience tells us that oftentimes if we don't mute all the attendees, a lot of times there'll be some just background noise that occurs and just kind of gets in the way of everyone being able to hear well, and also makes the recording of this a little more difficult. And again, because I'm the presenter, it's not possible for me to simultaneously look for your comments and questions that you might want to send me during the session. So please, after the session, and you can do it during the session if you'd like, you can send me questions and emails, but please, again, feel free to take note of my personal email address, tom.keating@spiderstrategies.com, or you can also use our education department email, which is learn@spiderstrategies.com. With that said, let's go ahead and jump into Scoreboard and talk about charts and reports. I'm opening up Google Chrome, which just happens to be the browser that I'm using today, and have, of course, navigated my way to the home page of Scoreboard. I'm going to direct your attention over to the left in the primary black navigation pane, and about 5 things down is the charts and reports section of Scoreboard. We'll be spending the majority of our time today in the charts and reports section, showing you again how to create reports, how to work with reports, and how to create charts. Before we get there, though, I want to kind of step back and just introduce you to the idea that these charts and reports we're going to talk about and teach you how to build today are accessible in other areas of Scoreboard as well. You don't have to just be in the charts and reports section to be able to access and view, work with reports. Other areas or sections of Scoreboard where you can get to charts and reports is within your own personal bookmarks area. If you have chosen to add a report or a chart into your little library within the bookmarks section of Scoreboard, they are, of course, available to you. So, for instance, I have a sales overview report as the very first object within my personal bookmarks area. I also have a chart comparison report of revenue numbers within my, again, bookmarks area as well. Just so that you understand how easy it is to add something as a bookmark into your little personal bookmarks library, I'm going to jump back to the charts and reports section and just open up an example of a report that I have ready to go to talk with you about today. And I'll just click on this annual Kpi Data Report. And let's imagine that I'd like to add this as a bookmark item within my bookmarks library. All I have to do is click the star button towards the upper right to say, make this a bookmark item within my library. If I navigate back to the bookmarks area, I now see the annual Kpi Data Report in my little library of content in the bookmarks area. Another area or section of Scoreboard where you can access charts and reports is via dashboards. So an example of a dashboard that is comprised of report content is this charts and reports content on dashboard that I have created. And effectively what I've done is just added a chart and a small report over on the right, the Scorecard Item Owner and Updater Report on the right. In terms of how this can come together, again, it's very easy within a dashboard to add report or chart content. All you have to do is get yourself into edit mode on the dashboard and use the usual add widget button to add some report content to a dashboard. And you simply navigate to where the existing report content lives, you select it, pardon me, and add it onto your dashboard. A third area where charts and report content can be easily viewed and accessed by your consumers and users is within briefings. Again, briefings are our sort of PowerPoint-like slide presentation area within Scoreboard. And in this case, I've got a briefing called Charts and Reports Briefing Example. And this is a simple 6-page, if you will, briefing showing me a couple different types of reports and graphs all compiled together into a briefing book or a briefing, giving me page by page easy navigation. And again, all of this content, again, came from existing charts and report content and was just simply added into a briefing. We'll be covering briefings in other training videos in the future, but briefings are a great way to compile and bring together lots of diverse different content, including, in this case, charts and reports. So with that said, in terms of where you can find charts and reports content outside of the charts and reports section, let's go ahead and jump into the charts and reports section of Scoreboard and show you how you can easily build reports and charts. Before we get in there, I do want to just make you aware that for today's purposes, I have a training content folder that I've structured with existing out-of-the-box reports, which we'll talk about one by one, and existing charts so that you have a sense of what types of charts are available for you to create within Scoreboard. This list of what I'm calling out-of-box reports has been compiled based on the types of reports that are available for you to quickly and easily create when you generate or create a new report in the charts and reports section of Scoreboard. Towards the top of the black navigation pane, if I click the new report button, which is the starting point for all types of reports or charts, if I click new report, I'm provided with a selection pane allowing me to select from existing reports. These are the ones that I call the out-of-box reports that are on the left-hand column, as well as an initiative report and what we call advanced reports of custom ad hoc report writer, generator, and custom chart writer generator, as well as a SQL console. So one thing that I felt might be important for us to do today as we take an overview of reports within Scoreboard is to just quickly take a look at all of the different out-of-the-box reports that are available to you. So I'm going to click cancel here just to stop that create a report process and instead just review some of the existing reports that are all of those out-of-the-box types. The first is the Scorecard Item Owner and Updater Report. It's a very simple report. It just gives you a quick overview of who it is that owns any given scorecard object, whether it be a perspective, objective, or of course KPI. We have an annual Kpi Data Report, which again, the name conveys exactly what it does, is it gives you an annual overview of the performance of your KPIs, your Kpi areas, and your specific KPIs over the full calendar year. In this case, we only have data, provided through June, so July through December is, of course, devoid of data at this point. Moving down the list, we have the Scorecard Structure Report, which again, from if you will, an administrative overview kind of perspective, allows you to understand the structural nature of the scorecards within your Scoreboard environment. Moving down the list a little further, we have probably the most popular of the out-of-the-box reports is the Red Kpis Report. This is one I'll create for you here in just a minute, but this, of course, as its name implies, gives you visibility to any KPI that during your defined or desired time period has had any scores that have fallen in the red or underperforming threshold. So this just gives you a nice quick overview so you can look for areas where you're just not performing as desired. Sometimes you might have green indicators or yellow indicators as well, because in a given time period you might be doing quite well. but in another time period he did poorly. So anytime a KPI has received a red or underperforming score, it will exist in this red KPIs report. Moving further down the list, we have the missing KPIs value report, and you see that, again, for the month of June 2018, I do have a fair amount of KPIs which presently have not been provided with actual values, thus they cannot be scored. So it gives me a sense of where we need to go in and provide the desired information so that we can be up to date as we're looking at performance through June of 2018. Again, moving down the list, we have our KPI update frequency report. This, again, just very quickly gives you a quick sense of how often or what the frequency that's associated with all of your various KPIs is, as well as who the updater is, and a sense of their present score situation in the June 2018 column. Again, proceeding down the list, the Kpi Comparison Report is a great report because this allows you to compare performance between two different organizations against each other. A lot of times the reporting that you can achieve here within Scoreboard is limited to just one organization and the various Kpi areas and KPIs that live within a single organization. If and when you need to compare two different organizations within your larger corporate structure, you can achieve that via this Kpi Comparison Report. Again, moving down, the Scorecard Attributes Report, again, gives you a relatively broad attribute description of all of the various KPIs, Kpi areas, and even scorecards within a given organization. And then lastly, we have this Initiatives Report. This is a report that is relatively new to version 3.2 of Scoreboard. It is like a report that used to be, for those of you who maybe were version 2 customers of Scoreboard, we had an Initiatives Report, and this report has again returned to the land of Scoreboard version 3.2, again giving you a nice overview of initiatives that you have set up within your organization that allow you to track project-based performance over time and against budget, and all the information that you might desire to view about your initiatives is available in a quick, concise initiatives report. So that's just a broad overview of the types of reports that you can easily create with just a couple clicks when you take advantage of, again, the out-of-the-box reports. So to give you a sense of how easy it is to create those reports, I'll click New Report, and I'll select the one that I described as probably the most popular of the out-of-the-box reports, which is the red Kpis Report, and I'll select it and simply click Next. All you need to do is really point it at the area of your organization and your scorecard that you'd like to report on and get a sense of where you are performing in the red or underperforming area. So in our case, let's take a look at the financial organization on the left, and over on the right, I'll go ahead and just leave it with the entire financial profit and loss scorecard. If you want to dial that in and be a little more concise on what you want to see, you can get into selecting Kpi Areas and or even just single individual KPIs. I'd like to get a sense of across the entire financial and profit and loss scorecard where we have underperforming KPIs. So I'll select that and click Next. The next step of this process, the next and last step of the process, is to define the time period that you'd like to see within the report. In my case, I'd like to go a couple periods or a couple months back, so I'd like to see over 3 periods, so 2 previous periods as well as the current period in this report. And I don't really think I need to see the description of any of the KPIs that will appear in the report, so I'll deselect description, but I would like to understand or know who the updaters of the KPIs that may appear in this red Kpis report are. So I'll select updaters and then click Finish. And immediately I'm delivered a nice tabular report showing me all of the KPIs that over the previous 3 months have had any scores that have fallen into the red. And again, gives me a sense of who the owners and the updaters of those KPIs are, if and when they're defined, as well as, of course, visibility to their actual performance and their color-coded, again, red underperformance in any of the time periods that I selected to be included in this report. After creating a report like this, as with any type of report that you're going to create here within Scoreboard, you're going to want to click Save in the lower right-hand corner to save this report. And I'll just call this, we'll say it's Wednesday Red Kpis Report, and I'll click Save. So that report has now come into existence, and again, it lives at the bottom at the present time under the out-of-the-box reports folder at the bottom of the list of all the reports that I previously showed you. So that's a way that you can take advantage of the out-of-the-box reports, and what you'll find is that any of those out-of-the-box reports provide you with a nice, typically really just two-step process to generate the report. Usually the columns and the layout of the report has already been defined behind the scenes, and you're just pointing it at the scorecard or the KPI area or just single KPIs that you'd like to report on, and then you're selecting a time period and you're done. So they're very nice in that regard, that you can very quickly and easily generate a report. Another type of report that you may want to create is more of an ad hoc report, where you're just going to generate it yourself from scratch without being dependent on any previously existing layout or template. To achieve that, over on the right, under the Initiatives and Advanced column, we have a Report Writer selection. So I'll click Report Writer and select Next. The Report Writer development process is effectively a three-step process. So you're going to pick the columns, you're going to pick what time period you want to include, and then you're going to define what rows, or how you're going to filter the data from the underlying scoreboard repository to pull the data appropriately into your report. So as the Report Writer's first step says, it's choose columns. And in this case, we will go, of course, with the default of the name of anything in this report. I will also add the ID value. I'd like to know who the updaters are for anything that comes into this report. And over on the right, under performance, I'd like for everything to be color-coded. I'd like to know its score, its normalized score. I'd like to know its actual KPI value when it's a KPI. I'd like to see thresholds, goal, and any variance to goal. So this is where, again, I pick what columns I want to see in the report, and that takes care of step one of the development process, and I'll click Next. In step two, you have the opportunity to define, again, the time period that you want to include in your report. It will default to using the current calendar. If by chance you want to change the periodicity as presented in the report, you can certainly do so right here, right up front. And then again, like we saw with the red KPIs report, I have the opportunity to define effectively the time range that I want to include in this report. And again, I'll just jump back and select 2 periods earlier. So again, the result of this will be effectively a 3-month report. Again, towards the very bottom, if you want to show abbreviated values to keep the report nice and concise and not get into really long, potentially decimal precision, you can avoid that by just selecting Show Abbreviated Values, and then click Next to move to the third step of the process. And this is where you're defining what rows you want to pull from the underlying scoreboard data repository. So the goal here is to add a filter so that you're not trying to pull absolutely everything from the repository, and instead get it focused on the information you want to see in the report. So towards the middle right, there's an Add button. I'll click Add to create a filter, and then you use the Filter On dropdown to further, again, define how and where you want to filter the data. In my case, I'm familiar with the scorecards that I'm working with, so I'm going to select specific scorecard items as the way I want to move to the next step of actually pointing to the data and the rows of data that I want to pull from the repository, and I'll click Next. And I get the same type of view that we saw earlier in terms of here's a broad overview of your organization and the scorecards therein. So once again, I'll select the financial organization on the left, and again on the right, the financial profit and loss scorecard. And again, as before, I would like to see everything within the financial profit and loss scorecard, so I'll select Add to the right of that, and you see that it is now presented up at the top with its ID, its name, and what organization it's coming from. Another key thing for you to be aware of is towards the far upper right, there's a little blue check under the heading called Cascade. And here's where you define whether you want to include the descendants for that particular scorecard item or not. If I deselect that check, then all I will get in the report is one single row, which will give me information about just the financial profit and loss scorecard and its summarized, rolled up performance. I won't see any details about the revenue information, any of the specific KPIs that live under revenue, Nothing. I'll just get one row. So I would like to have everything that's available within the financial profit and loss scorecard visible to me in the resulting report, so I'm going to check that back on. At this point, we're done defining the filters that we want to see, the row filters. So we've finished all the three of the development steps of defining and creating this report, and then we simply just need to click Get Report to actually generate the report. So ta-da, lickety-split, I have a report that has been generated, providing me with all of the information from my financial profit and loss scorecard, as well as the KPI areas of revenue and cost of sale and what have you, and all of the individual or unique KPIs within those KPI areas. Again, at this point, you want to click Save to save your report, and so I'll call this Financial Report Writer Example, is what we'll call this one. All right, so that is the creation of a report. Now, the report is, of course, effectively done at this point and can be consumed and used. It can be, again, as we talked about earlier, I could make this a bookmark. I could add it to a briefing. I could turn around and add it to a dashboard. There's a variety of things, of course, that I can do with this report. But before we leave it behind, I do want to address editing reports. So we've created a couple reports, but once they come into existence, if later you want to make changes to the report, please be aware that at the bottom of the black navigation panes on the left, there is an edit button. There's also an edit button towards the upper right. There's an edit tab button or an edit button down at the bottom of the black navigation pane. So I'll click edit. And in this case, you get a presentation, a summarized overview of what this report is all about when you're in edit mode. It shows you its name. It defines for you and gives you a sense of what row filters have been defined. It shows you all the columns that you selected, and it, of course, shows you the date range. Now, if you want to make any changes to the columns or the date range, of course, you're going to click the edit button towards the right of those areas to return to that screen, just the single screen of the whole process. And you could, for instance, add, I also want to see data type, for instance, as another column in the report, and then just click next. Again, I will confirm or change if desired the time period, and then just click finish. So I've edited by just adding, in this case, one single additional column into the report. I left the time period the same. I left the filters the same. Now, if you want to add a filter, you can certainly do so by clicking, again, the Add button towards the right of the Row Filters area in the middle, and click Add. And of course, you can add another filter on, again, in this case, let's say a specific scorecard item. Again, click Next. And again, you're presented with the same view of organization, scorecards, KPI areas, and so on. So in this case, if I wanted to add some additional rows of information to the report, let's say I want to pull them in from the customer support organization. And again, I'd like to include everything from the customer help desk. If I click Add to that, it will add customer help desk as another element, another filter element for this report. And then if I click Done, you'll see that what I get in terms of row filters is it's filtering both, looking for the financial profit and loss scorecard and its descendants, as well as the customer help desk and its descendants. And if I say Done, here's the problem with doing what I just did, is I set up two filters that don't work together. Each of that, what they're looking for is a unified result of each filter, and it's coming up with nothing that comes from the first filter and simultaneously comes from the second filter. So this is the key to me showing you this edit capability about row filters. If I click Edit here, what I'm going to do is remove the second filter that I just created. I'm sorry, I'm just going to click on it to change it. And I'm going to change in the lower left-hand corner. Notice that it says Add to Existing Filter as an OR. So in this case, the two filters will each do their job to go get the rows that they will pull from the data repository. And instead of trying to look for a combined data set out of the two filters, it will just give the results of each separate filter in the report. So at this point, if I click Done, and then Done again at the bottom of the black navigation pane, and notice here in the row filters, the little word OR up in here. So it's showing two different filters, but they have an OR relationship rather than previously they were working with an AND relationship. between the two filters. So I'll click done, and now I do get results. I get all the data that's coming from the financial profit and loss area, as well as information that's coming from our customer support filter and all of the rows that it in turn provided and delivered from querying the underlying data repository. So that's kind of a key point, is if you're going to do multiple filters, that you just acknowledge that by default you'll get an and relationship between the filters, but you have the capability to limit it and change it to be an or kind of relationship. Okay. One other thing while we're working with the results of this report is, as you're viewing reports, we now have the capability for you to sort all of the rows in a report by any of the columns along the top. So what I did is I just clicked on the score column heading for the month of April 2018, and you see that the results have changed to now show me sort all the rows in an ascending order. If I click score again, it will change that and invert the sorting so that now I'm seeing it in a descending order, so largest to smallest in this case. If I click on it again, it removes all sorting and just reverts back to the presentation according to how the data was just by default returned from the scorecard structure and the filters that we defined. So sorting of rows within reports is a new capability of version 3.2 of Scoreboard. All right. So hopefully that's enough of an introduction and education for you in terms of, the creation of basic reports. Again, I would encourage you to get yourself a little more familiar with the out-of-the-box reports. Hang on, I'll just save the changes that I made to that report. The out-of-the-box reports, again, are available to you in the left-hand column. And then, of course, we just showed you how easy it is in a three-step process to create your own ad hoc report. Let's move ahead then and talk about charts. So again, before we get into actually creating a chart, I just wanted to show you a couple examples of existing charts so you have a sense of the, if you will, the art of the possible and what types of charts you'll be able to create here within Scoreboard. We go from anything as simple as a nice line chart showing you performance over time. Again, you'll notice that if you hover your cursor over anywhere on the line, it'll pop up and show you the data. All charts are, of course, in turn supported by a table of information down below that corresponds to everything you've asked to be visually presented within the chart. So a line chart is one type you can create. We have another type, of course, of a bar chart. In this case, I did include a trend line, and I'm not sure how well it's coming across through the webcast, but there's a gray trend line that's spanning across the 6 different months of performance being presented here within this bar chart. We have another type of bar chart, which is just a stacked bar chart. Again, I'm showing you the same measures in each case here of product revenue in just different types or styles of charts or graphs. We have area charts that you can, of course, create. We have a polar chart showing you, again, the same information here of product revenue. All of those 5 different charts all showed you the exact same product revenue information, just different visual presentations. Another type of chart that's quite popular is, a stacked bar chart. And you'll notice here in this case, of course, I've moved to showing more than just one KPI value. In this case, we're showing, the book revenue, training revenue, and product revenue compared to each other in a stacked bar style. We also have a stacked area style of chart you can create. Good old pie charts are still very popular and helpful in a lot of cases to get, performance understanding in terms of ratio-based, performance on KPIs. We have a similar donut chart that you can create. And we have the opportunity, of course, to do combined chart types. All the previous ones were fairly simplistic in nature. This just gives you a sense that you can bring together a couple of different chart styles or types together into one overriding chart. And this one is also fun because what this is doing is bringing together both a KPI value and an initiative performance reflection. So in this case, the line is the performance of an initiative over time, and the bars are, the revenue KPI values over time. And so what you're able to do with a graph or chart like this is say, hey, is our performance in terms of migrating servers to cloud, is that significantly in any way impacting our revenue? Let's compare these two different disparate values within one chart. So I'll show you how to create a chart just like this in a few minutes. So that's the types of charts that are available to you. And again, to create a chart, it's a similar sort of process in terms of creating it anew. You're going to click again on the New Report button at the top. And again, over in the right-hand column, we'll go to the Chart Writer selection and click Next. And the Chart Writer gives you a beautiful and very simplistic and easy to work with interface here to create a chart. And just working from the top down, be aware that within the chart, you can compare items or you can compare time ranges. In this case, we'll just leave it at the default of items. Again, as we discussed earlier, you have the opportunity to adjust the periodicity or the calendar that you'd like to present in your charts. Again, in terms of the time range that you'd like to display in the chart, you can customize that. I'm going to shrink this down from 12 periods earlier to just down to 5. So I'll end up with effectively a 6-month chart. I'll get 5 periods earlier and the current monthly period. And then, of course, I need to add the series or the KPI data that I'd like to present within a chart. And it doesn't have to be tied to just KPIs. You can select, of course, Kpi Areas. You can select even scorecards. So, and what have you. So in this case, we'll again work with the financial organization on the left. And again, I'll focus my attention on the financial profit and loss scorecard and the revenue KPI area and the KPIs that live under revenue. So we'll start with just product revenue, and then I'll click Done. Oh, before I click Done, folks, an important feature here. In the lower left-hand corner, there's a series drop-down selection. And what it will do by default is presume that you want to see actual values for the KPI that you're selecting. If you select on a KPI area like revenue, then really all you get is the score, the normalized, the rolled up normalized score for that KPI area. But if you have a specific KPI selected, you get to choose what you want to see on the chart, whether it be its normalized score, its actual performance KPI value, its red flag value, or its goal value. So in my case, I'll leave it at the default for now of actual value and just click Done. And again, by default, it expects that what you want to see is a line chart, but of course we have plenty of different charts, as I showed you earlier, lots of different chart types that you can select from. In this case, I will just leave it as a line for the time being. And again, if you want to customize the name that's going to be presented on the chart, you can select the scorecard item name, the organization name, the series name, or you can define your own custom label or name, for that series or that KPI value on your chart. I'll again just leave it as the scorecard item name. You do have the opportunity to provide a background threshold. I'll return to that in a second. And you have control over what axes labels are presented, X, Y, and I'll come back and play with the set Y-axis range in just a minute. But for now, let's just very quickly just generate a simple line chart for our performance in the KPI of product revenue over a 6-month period of time. So if you take away all my talking through that, it really took about 30 seconds to generate, this chart with the data that we want to see. And again, you've got the table summarizing performance with nice color coding underneath the chart, and of course the opportunity to hover over any of the monthly data points and get a distinct understanding of exactly what value is being portrayed at that point in time. Now, similar to the reports, once a chart exists, you're not locked into the result. You can certainly edit it. So again, the edit button down at the bottom of the black navigation pane on the left and or the edit tab towards the upper right are available to you to get into edit mode. And it effectively returns you to that same interface that you used to create the chart and allows you to make whatever kind of changes or additions you might want. So again, just to keep working with this chart as it exists right now, let's add a background threshold, giving me, if you will, the thresholds, the red, yellow, green thresholds for the product revenue measure that we're portraying. And again, another thing I'd like to share with you here, which is a cool new feature, is the ability that you have to create your own customized Y-axis range. So presently, the software is just looking at the lowest value and the highest value and defining, well, that's the range that I'll just show. But if I want to customize that, I can certainly do so. So let's say I want to go with 500,000 as the maximum, and the minimum, let's say I want it to be 200,000. And click Done. And then click, I'll just save. I have yet to save this chart, so I am going to go ahead and save it. And again, we'll just call this Wednesday chart writer is what I'll call it, and then I'll click save one more time with that change of name, and then click done. So again, having added in a very distinctly different y-axis range going all the way down to 200,000, the chart of course looks a lot different, because really the numbers, as you can see, are they're all in the 400, 450-ish, 400,000 range. And so if I include the y-axis to go all the way down to 200,000, I've got a lot of empty dead space. So, you know, I might want to go back and change my y-axis range filter, or setting, I should say, to be something more like, you know, 400,000. And say done, and done again under the black navigation pane. And so the report is back, you know, seems a little more legible to my eye as it exists right now. So that's one example of a chart, very simple chart that you can create. I'm going to create for us another new report, another new chart, just to continue with the chart development process. I'll click save to save those minor changes. And again, select the chart writer to create a new chart. And in this case, it'll be a chart quite similar to what I just created, focusing on revenue numbers. But again, I'm going to just limit the time frame to just be 6 periods, and I'll add a series. And again, we'll focus on the financial organization and the revenue Kpi area. I'll select product revenue. And in this case, I'm going to select score, because what I'd like to do in this chart is compare product revenue to training revenue to book revenue. But I already know that they have vastly different scales of income. Product revenue, we make hundreds of thousands. Book revenue, we make more like tens of thousands. So they wouldn't really work well on one chart presenting their actual value. But if we want to compare their scores, that will come out a lot better. So I'll select score as the series in the lower left and click done. And then in this case, I will go ahead and leave, or I'm going to change product revenue to be a bar. And I'm not going to adjust any of the labels or the y-axis range. And I'll add another series, so effectively another KPI value to the same chart. I'd also like to have training revenue on this chart. And again, I'd like to present its score. And I'll click done there. And again, the training revenue, it will adopt, if you will, the same type of graph that was selected for the earlier defined product revenue. But for training revenue, let's say I'd like for training revenue to be a line, and I'd like to change its color from the kind of teal color I have to a brighter, more distinct, you know, bright red. And then I'll click one more time on add series to add one more data point, one more KPI to this chart. And again, we're going to focus on the score, in this case for book revenue. Again, click done. And for book revenue, we'll make the book revenue an area presentation, an area graph or area chart. And again, we'll give it the color, something a little more subtle, like kind of a light orange, sort of behind the scenes. And at this point, I'll go ahead and click finish. And I have, you know, effectively a combination chart showing me 3 different KPIs, all presented in different styles or different chart types, but giving me a sense of how we're performing over time. And I can look for any trends, any, you know, performance kind of, if you will, it's just trends over time. Okay, so that is the chart writer. And then I also told you that I would show you how to create a chart that combines a measure, a KPI, I should say, with an initiative. So I'll click save here one more time on this chart to move away, and we'll call this Wednesday 2 chart writer. And then we'll create a new report by clicking new report. And then again will be a chart. So chart writer, and click next. And again, what I'm going to be doing here is, again, a combination chart with 2 different series, 2 different KPIs, or in this case, it'll be 1 KPI and an initiative. So I'll select, again, a more limited time period here. I'll, again, just go with the 5 periods earlier, and I'll add a series. And again, in this case, we'll go into the financial area, and we'll just look at revenue, and we'll go ahead and just leave revenue as the value that, well, we'll look at product revenue. Okay, and I'll go ahead and leave it as the actual values for product revenue and click done for that KPI. Then I want to add another series. And in this case, at the top in the upper left, notice that there's a type selection. So you have 2 different tabs, scorecard item or initiative. So in this case, what I want to know is whether our initiative to migrate servers to the cloud is really having any impact on our product revenue bottom line. This is what I'd like to compare in one chart. So I'll select Migrate Servers to Cloud and click Done. And for the Migrate Servers to Cloud, again, I'll adjust its color, again, to be red, so it stands out a little better. And here's what's kind of important is I want to see a separate axis for this initiative as compared to the product revenue axis. So I'm going to say axis on the right for the Migrate Servers to Cloud initiative that will be presented within the chart. So I've got product revenue set up, ready to go. Again, I'm going to make it a bar, actually, as a bar. And then Migrate Servers to Cloud is set up as a line. And at this point, I'll just go ahead and click Finish. And so I have a sense of, well, okay, we got our Migrate Servers to Cloud up, and did that really have any impact at all on our product revenue bottom line? And it really doesn't seem to have a whole lot of difference here. If we go back over time, let's see if we look back in May or April, you get a sense that over time it took us a while to get that Migrate Servers to Cloud initiative, finished up and in place. And it doesn't really seem that as over time we brought that up to its performance at 100% and delivered migrating servers to cloud, doesn't really seem to have had any visible impact on product revenue, which remained fairly static across the whole time that initiative was being put in place. So that's just the third type of chart that's available to you to create within Scoreboard. Moving ahead here, couple last topics that I want to just touch on with you, and I won't save that report, is the SQL console. This is not very often used, but it is something that you should at least be aware of in terms of when you're defining a report. You can use direct SQL to query the underlying Scoreboard data repository, where you can define something as simple or quite a bit more complex than what I have here, which is just select star, from a login history table, which is one of the tables in our underlying Scoreboard data repository, and click Finish. And it will deliver to me a report, a tabular report, just like the type of reports we created earlier, giving me, again, visibility to the raw, if you will, data that's coming from that table in our underlying Scoreboard data repository. So definitely want you to be aware of that as something that you can take advantage of if you need to. Most of our customers don't do a whole lot of direct SQL querying, but it's something that's available to you. And then another thing that I wanted to touch on here, as we're getting relatively close to the end of time here, is using reports as a way to make mass edits to some Scorecard objects. So up till now, all of the reports and charts that I've created were intended to be used and consumed, either by myself or by others within Scoreboard, in the future, to understand, how they're doing in terms of performance, hopefully gaining actionable insight from everything, whether it be the visualizations in the charts or from the tabular reports. But you can also leverage the report writer to do edits to your Scorecard structures and properties of your scorecards. So that's the next task here, is just to show you how to take advantage of this mass edit capability. So I'll click New Report and select Report Writer, and then click Next. And again, what I'll do here is create a pretty simple report where I'll just say I want to know the name of the objects I'm pulling in. I'd like to see their ID and their updaters, and where's owners? I'm looking for owners. There we go, owners as well. So I guess I'll go ahead and grab score and KPI value as well, just so we have some actual metrics here, or KPI values in the report. And then I'll click Next. And again, I'll pick a time period. Again, I'll do my usual. I'll go 2 periods earlier to current period. Click Next. And then I need to go and define, of course, the filter. So I'm pointing to the area of the scorecard that I intend to make some changes. So let's imagine in this case that in the customer retention area, hang on, we'll go to specific scorecard items and click Next. So over here, let's say that in the information technology organization, within my larger corporate world, we've got an information technology department that has its own scorecard. And the premise here would be that I want to change who the updater is for all of these KPIs that live within the information technology scorecard. And I'd like to do it en masse for all 5 of these simultaneously, because we have a new employee named Joe Updater, who we want to have be responsible for updating all of the KPIs in the information technology scorecard. So I'll select that scorecard and click done, and then get the report. Okay, so there's my very simple report, showing me the owners and the updaters for the information technology scorecard and all of its underlying KPIs. Notice in the lower right-hand corner, there is a button called Mass Edit. If I click Mass Edit, another column appears up in the report itself on the far left, allowing me to select any and or potentially all of the elements of this scorecard that I would like to update in one way or another, or change, I should say, in one way or another. So I'm just going to go ahead and click everything. And what I'd like to do is edit those selected items so that I change who the updater is for all of them. So I'll click Edit Selected Items, and what I'm going to do is change. I'll scroll down and find Updater. I have to find it. Oh shoot, sorry folks, my mouse isn't really working very well for me. Updaters, come on. All right, so I want to change the updaters, and what I want to do is add another updater. And the gentleman that we would like to be the updater for all of the KPIs within this information technology scorecard is Joe Updater. So Joe Updater is now presented as the new updater, and I'll click Save, and then I'll click Done in the lower right-hand corner, and you see now that the updaters column within this report indicates that Joe Updater has been added as the updater for every one of the KPIs in that scorecard within that organization of information technology. So that's a great feature that you can take advantage of by just effectively using reports, not for delivering formalized finished reports, but for changing the underlying scorecard in a wide variety of ways. Okay, and that, folks, pretty much wraps up what I was intending to share with you today in this presentation on creating and editing and working with reports and charts within Scoreboard. I very much hope this has been helpful to you. Again, I would invite you, I'll bring up my PowerPoint presentation here one more time, very much invite you to contact me with any additional questions, concerns you may have, any need for more information. I'm always available to help. Again, tom.keating@spiderstrategies.com. We very much appreciate you all as Scoreboard customers, and thank you very much for attending today's training session. Have a great day.